It is exactly 19 after 9 o'clock. Welcome back. This is News and Views with me, Julie Ali, on Salam Media. We're now going to be joined by Director at the Rivonia Circle, and that, of course, is Tessa Dooms. We're going to be looking at their reaction to Parliament adapting to the Electoral Amendment Bill. We do know that the 2024 elections preparations are being made by all political parties, including the ANC, hard at work behind the scenes for the elections 2024. How is this going to impact on the upcoming elections? And I'm also kind of wondering about independent standing for the elections. What does that mean to you and I, and possibly even the taxpayer? Let's talk with Tessa. She's going to unpack all of that and more. A very good morning to you, Tessa. Thank you for your time and welcome.
Good morning.
Okay, you are the director at Rivonia Circle, so we do also know that you have a response or reaction to Parliament adapting or adopting to the Electoral Amendment Bill. What does it mean? Because when we do know that during the National Assembly's plenary yesterday, they passed the bill and adopted the report of the Portfolio Committee on Home Affairs, along with the amendments proposed by the National Council of Provinces.
Correct. So we are one step closer to having the bill now finalized. It's now gone to the president, and he has to apply his mind to whether or not the bill passes constitutional muster, is rational, and will actually stand. And I think we've been very clear that the bill in its current form does not take us very far in terms of getting a electoral process that gives independent candidates a fair opportunity to contest. So in the last year or so, we've had many engagements with Parliament, with the Portfolio Committee, with the Minister of Home Affairs even, and now the NCOP, just contesting the idea that what this bill actually requires is for independent candidates to contest directly with entire party lists, which then leads to a number of implications that make it an unfair process for independent candidates. So yes, independent candidates would be able to contest, which is what the court said must happen by 2024. But there are still questions about whether or not it will amount to a free and fair election in the current format.
I guess that is the all-important question, is it not? I'm also wondering about independent candidates. Are we not then, once this has been passed, the Electoral Amendment Bill, once it's passed, we're going to have to wait and see the outcome by the president, but is it not going to perhaps create a flurry of independence, and how will that impact on the political scenario?
Well, it should invite a flurry of independents to participate. We know at local government election connect level, there were about 1,000 people who were contesting as independents across the country. So that wouldn't be a new set of circumstances. But at the ward level and municipal level, we have a system where most independents would be contesting only on the ward ballot, which means they're contesting in a direct election at a very local level in a constituency, which is why you don't see a very long ballot paper, for example, just because there are 1,000 independents. They're not on the same ballot. They're in different ballots in different wards. And what Parliament has avoided is replicating a similar system where you have constituencies that are created so that independent candidates can contest in different constituencies, rather than what they're having to do now is contest an entire province and contest for national through the provincial system. So they've overcomplicated it and made it that we will probably have longer ballots, but it's because Parliament has chosen a particular kind of model. We also know that there are hundreds of parties that are registered. So I think the IEC has now said there's over 600 parties registered. And this is mainly because people are trying to contest at more local levels. And because they have not been able to contest as independents before, you have a lot of micro politics, which is around one independent candidate or a very small grouping of people that are supporting one person. But because they haven't had the ability to contest as independents fairly before, they've then registered parties. So it would actually be a good thing to have a space where fair independent candidates can contest. It will minimize the number of people who feel like they need to create more and more political parties.
What I worry about, Tessa, it sounds like the ideal scenario, because the more independence we have, the better chance we have of getting, hopefully, corrupt politicians out of the game. But that being said, we do know closer to the time there's going to be a lot of horse trading, there's going to be a lot of coalition talk. And won't these independents get sucked up into those type of scenarios? Promises will be made to them, and they then join other parties to give the other parties the numbers that they're looking for.
It happens by virtue of, just the way we set up again. Because when you get to a National Assembly level, for example, those 400 members of parliament then do vote for the president. So if you had a high number of independent candidates, if you had 50 seats for independent candidates or even higher, they would need to coalesce. They would need to determine who they're going to vote for in that context. And it's not necessarily bad that people need to come to agreements and coalesce. It's the principles around which they do it. And right now, even with political parties themselves, they're not necessarily doing it with the right principles in mind just because they're political parties. So what we need is principled people, whether they're independents or they're in parties. They must act on principle in the best interest of the country. And in fact, the best way to move away from this kind of crude horse trading would be accountability to the citizenry and the voters. And that's, again, why a constituency model would help us a lot more. Because then you could say, and you should be able to say, Mr. MP or Miss MP, you are actually representing our constituency. So when you go into those coalition talks, you should actually come and engage us and make sure that we are comfortable with the kinds of decisions you're going to make with your vote.
Important point indeed. But let's look at the issue around funding. If we're having that many independents coming on board, and you are suggesting that it's a good thing, and also a good thing that they do coalesce with other smaller parties just to give them the political muster. But funding, is that going to be an issue at all?
I think funding is going to be an issue. I think resources generally are going to be an issue, but not only for independent candidates. Even parties are struggling with funding. I think that we need to rethink politics in this country, and not only because of independent candidates. They're not a silver bullet, and we mustn't hedge all our bets on them. But we do need a different kind of politics, and the call for independent candidates signals that. More localized politics, where communities are actually rallying around a particular person or particular party or particular organization, so that they can see that they can hold accountable afterwards as well. And I think that those same communities need to get into more of a habit of funding the people who they are willing to vote for. I think we've been waiting for funding sources that come from, philanthropy and from high wealth individuals. But we also know that there are a lot of interest invested in that. And so it's in our best interest as communities that if we want people to represent us and we trust them enough with our vote, that we should start trusting them with the resources so that we have a buy-in to them as candidates, and also for the purposes of accountability afterwards.
Absolutely. You couldn't have explained it more clearly than the way you've just explained now. So it does sound like a great concept. What is the downside to the situation?
Well, currently the downside is that the current bill that we have certainly just does not give us an electoral system that we can trust to be fair. So, this is not just about funding independence. It's about making sure that whatever electoral system we go with in 2024 results in a free and fair election. And that's what we must ask the president to do today, is to apply his mind to whether or not the bill in front of him will result in a free and fair election. Free and fair for parties, for independent candidates, but most importantly for the voter. Every vote must count. And right now in the calculations and the way that it's set up, the formulas, it's even possible for votes to be discarded. We must come up with a system that is free and fair for everybody. And if not, then we are going against our own constitutional premise when we decided to be a democracy.
Just clarify one thing for me, which is quite worrying, Tessa. When you talk about discarded votes, do those votes not automatically go to the ANC? And that's a very big worry if that in fact does happen. How do we prevent something like that happening?
Are questions about that, because one of the quota systems, because an independent candidate can only take up one seat at a time, of course. And because they're going head to head with political parties that have entire lists, the votes that go to an independent candidate may exceed the number of votes they need for a seat, whereas the political parties get the full value for all of their votes. So those discarded votes can then go into a quota system and in some cases may be redistributed. And that is problematic. So that's something, there are many unanswered questions in this poll. And the most important question is why it is that we have individuals that are having to contest with entire political party lists.
Okay, that's where we will have to leave it. There seems to be, out of this conversation, Tessa, good news and not so good news. So let's wait and see what's the outcome and hopefully talk to you again to further unpack this issue with us. Thank you once again for your time. Tessa Dooms, Director at the Rivonia Circle. 9:31. This is News and Views on Salam Media. Standing by to talk with us. Our next interview, of course, is Chantal Gladwin Wood. She is an attorney and partner, notary and conveyancer at Schindler's Attorneys. We are going to be talking about how property owners may be affected by the increase in rates and taxes. Another ouch as far as our pockets are concerned. So that's an important discussion to be had right here on Salam Media.